Alright guys, just want to get started. We're going to start with some quick intros, talk about the org. If you guys are interested in Warrington Ventures, if you're students, please scan the QR code. But without further ado, let's get started.
Thank you, Harold. Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the Warrington Ventures Executive Board and our members, we want to thank you all for being here. We're extremely excited to introduce this incredible panel to you all today. Whittemore is the CIO and managing partner of Formal Funders, a hybrid venture capital fund and an investor network that discovers, funds, and builds early-stage technology companies. Formal Funders has $146 million in assets under management and has backed 96 companies since 2017.
And then second, we have Pablo Casilimas. He's a managing partner at OneSixOne Ventures, a Gainesville venture capital fund and accelerator with over $18 million of capital raised and invested with over 40 startups. Pablo is also a founder of Rutex, a Gainesville-based content marketing agency.
Third, we have Halberstein. He's the founder and CEO of Simplenight, a business-to-business omni-channel commerce platform enabling building digitalization infrastructure for the connected future, bridging the gap between vendors and customers to easily build lifestyle experiences, travel, and everyday purchases.
And then finally, we have Walt. He is the CEO and co-founder of PEVC Holdings, a Gainesville-based healthcare-focused private equity company that consolidates urgent care, primary care, and multidisciplinary clinics.
Give a round of applause for our panelists.
So we will be your moderators today. My name is Abhishek Kandalia. I'm a junior studying finance, and here's Alex.
My name is Alex Azar. I'm a senior at Warrington, and I have the privilege of being the head of curriculum at Warrington Ventures. Every Thursday, we have a 45-minute lecture in the sport area of private capital and alternative investments. This Thursday's lecture is on portfolio management. We have a robust analyst program where analysts solve real business cases for startups that you have innovated. So I encourage everyone to come to the general board meeting next week and speak to some of the members today to learn more.
And then again, as Darren mentioned, if you are interested, please sign the QR code for our newsletter and social media.
So we have some individual questions and some panel discussion questions. I'll go back and forth between them. There's an individual question that's asked, and what do you feel you need to jump in? Feel free to do that. We want to keep it pretty open. We also have some ad hoc questions that the audience sent us, which we'll get to at the end. So without further ado, we'll start off with a panel discussion question.
So the first question that everyone seems to be super interested in is looking towards the horizon, what trends do you forecast will significantly influence the trajectory of private equity, growth equity, and venture capital?
Got the microphone, so I'll start and pass it down here. And it's a good group that you put together because we're all probably going to have a very different, unique perspective here. So that's fun. But I think, right now you've got a crazy macro environment with rising interest rates. You've got a political election that probably the most continuous you've had in, maybe forever. At least it's probably the Civil War. And then you've got global things happening with, not one, but now two potential World War IIIs on the horizon. And so there's a lot of that. That's a lot of noise. And what that does, in my opinion, is that clams up wallets from LPs, and it makes LPs hesitant to do any sort of investment. And then the trickle down of that is it makes IPO markets lock up. Nobody wants to do an IPO when the market's not good. So it's kind of having a back down effect where it's cramming down valuations, and then that's causing more bridge rounds. It's causing earlier companies to have a harder time raising or be more realistic with their valuations. So I think all over the board, it's causing a potential risk where that means correction. So I think, what we do, we're looking out at 10-year time horizons. Usually our companies exit in 5 to 7 years. So we look past that, but for us, it's a big opportunity to invest right now because valuations are more reasonable, where they probably should have been all along. They're not cheap, but they're not overpriced anymore, where you got to really pay up and you take a lot more risk doing that.
So building off of that, I think that he was talking about the geopolitical tensions and potential for World War III, and space that we're really interested in and is now trending and growing really fast is defense tech, right? This is critical to our company's national security, and the Department of Defense is throwing money around like crazy right now, looking for new technologies, new ways to keep our people safe, but also be prepared in case something escalates. And so we're really excited to be investing in government tech and defense tech. It's an interesting space. And the other thing, going to valuations, Ryan is spot on. Right now, the valuations are reasonable. I think nobody can really predict where things are headed, but from what I've been hearing and seeing, I personally think that we're not all the way down yet. I think things are going to keep coming down, and it's worth being patient. It's worth getting to know the founders. Right now, founders are becoming they're being forced to become more capital efficient and build a real business model and a profitable cash flow generating business versus 3 years ago when everybody was focused on vanity metrics or just growth or superficial metrics. So I think it's a really good time to be deploying capital, and it's really important to do your diligence when you're looking into these deals. And then the last piece, obviously, is artificial intelligence is one of the most trending things right now, and it's interesting to see what comes of this, because right now everybody's talking about it, everybody's building something with AI, and then you've got the 800-pound gorilla OpenAI who is innovating rapidly and releasing new features, product additions, and they're in a way displacing a lot of these new companies that are being started. It's like one day you've got an AI company, the next day OpenAI is doing exactly what you're trying to do, and they already have the brand equity and the customers and the distribution. So it's interesting to see what's going to come out of it and what's going to last long term versus what's just a fad.
Both really great points from Ryan and Pablo. I'm going to give you a perspective from a founder, pretty substantial amount of capital, but I've also survived many different cycles, including COVID. So, as an entrepreneur, the last thing I want to do to encourage other entrepreneurs is, rethink your ideas, because that's part of the beauty of it and the magic is you guys want to shape and change the world with your perspective. So, much like I did many years ago. So, however, if you're hearing what both Pablo and Ryan are saying, is the needs of the world and kind of the market, depending on what your affinity is, are changing. Definitely be aware. I've been doing a lot of research, seeing the trends that are going on there, and taking the kind of entrepreneurial ventures that you guys are either working on already or are conceptualizing, and maybe doing a little bit of rethinking on that of how this plays for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, because the landscape is changing out there. 1,000% revenue is very important. No one's ever going to fault you for it. However, being capital efficient with your business is even more critical these days, right? So outlandish, wild growth ideas and strategies, you can throw those out the window, and you got to reverse your thinking of, 1, is my idea relevant to begin with? 2, is it relevant for the next 5 years given the way the world looks? 3, how am I going to make money? 4, make money. 5, survive and be efficient with making money. And if you do that, odds are you'll probably survive. Now, another thing that I advise you on, much like Pablo was mentioning, have a strategic mindset, right? Based on the trends that are kind of shaping out in the landscape, there are corporate ventures, there's accelerators, incubators that are sponsored by major corporations, the government, universities, etc. There's a lot of capital that's sitting on the sidelines waiting to deploy. I get called, again, our company, we're not really a private equity friendly company, I would say. I get reached out to by 2 to 3 private equity companies probably every 2 weeks. Growth equity, probably 5 of them every month. And because they're sitting on the sidelines looking to deploy capital, trying to chase those lower valuations and opportunities like Ryan mentioned. But as an entrepreneur, as you're growing your business, focus on kind of the core, surviving through it, being diligent through it, and making sure that your product matters in the way that the world is turning. Full transparency, we're actually a portfolio company of Florida Funders. And when Florida Funders came in as an investor at Simplenight, it was right kind of before really COVID started and ramped up. And our plans, our growth strategies, everything just changed. And our meetings, our strategy sessions became around operational efficiencies, running business, everything you guys are learning in your classes. I'm a former Gator, so I went here and I learned just like you guys in these classrooms. So all of these things that you're learning in the classes will be coming, to the surface right now. They're extremely critical. Things like operations management, human resource, IT, even things like HR, insurance. The term force majeure, you probably have heard it. You guys kind of scoff at it when you don't even pay attention to it. It's so important because what's going to happen in markets like now, contracts will be canceled for things like that. So, I would just kind of take a different perspective, heed the advice that many of us are talking about, and come to us as resources too.
So I come from a different perspective. Not to invalidate, just to give you a different point of view to complement all of, I think, the on-target comments that were made here. The more things change, the more they stay the same. I'm 61 years old. My first election that I voted in when I was 18 was 1980, when I was a freshman here at UF, and that was Jimmy Carter to Ronald Reagan. Okay? Everything that I'm seeing today in a slightly different dressing is what we saw at the end of the Jimmy Carter era for a lot of the same reasons. The movie's playing over and over again because we get a generational amnesia. So what I see going on in the next few years is going to be same old fundamentals and back to fundamentals. Okay? We're going to go back to fundamentals. In my short time in business, I graduated in '85. I saw the PC revolution and was a part of it. I saw the internet revolution was a part of it. And now we see the SaaS revolution, and we go on and we see, the work from home revolution and outsourcing and so forth. To me, the secret for success is the same it's always been. You can't be the person. You need to know a lot of people who are the people who have the knowledge that you need and don't have. Number two, work ethic. Work is going to outdo everything. The nice thing about it is, with all of the knocks on people trying to find the shortcuts and so forth, is anyone who's willing to put in the hours right now will clearly and quickly separate themselves from the rest of the pack. Okay? Thirdly is, while it's great to work from home, very hard to build companies working from home except for certain types of companies. It's still whatever business you get into, it's a people business. Whether it's the people of your own people, or it is the people skills with the people you do business with, your customers, your suppliers, your investors, and so forth. So I come from a different perspective of that. I never tried to be an expert in anything. I just tried to go wide enough to where I could find the people who were experts, because I was just saying as this started, you can hire 100 times more expertise than you ever had in about one day than you could develop the rest of your career. So the key thing is go into fundamentals. What are the threats? What are the issues? What do you know? What do you not know? Who knows what you need to know, and how do you bring them into your fold, and how do you move forward? And I think that's one of the key things. That's the way it's always been in business. That's the way it's always going to be in business. There's a lot of money out there, that is looking for places to be invested, but they're going to invest in solid fundamentals and solidly run companies.
Thank you again. It's very interesting to hear you mention how there's a much more focus now for business models to be capital efficient and very practical. So Pablo, one question we had for you was, how is the startup landscape different today than when you started? Could you elaborate on maybe how it was before, how things might have been a little bit less practical before, kind of the relationship between ease of getting capital through the capital markets now versus that?
Yeah, absolutely. So they probably have better answers than me, because I've been doing the least of everybody here. But when we were entering, when we were first getting started, we were in a completely different market than where we're at today. So we first launched our accelerator summer of 2020, right after COVID hit. And everybody suspected that when COVID hit, everything was going to go downhill. But the complete opposite happened, because they started printing money, handing out PPP loans, and market just shot up. Everything was inflated. it was kind of a ridiculous time. We were seeing deals while running our accelerator, and even some companies that went through our accelerator, the rounds were filling in a week, in some cases even like less than a week, a few days, like $1 million rounds, $2 million rounds, at crazy valuations, pre-revenue, pre-product in a lot of cases. And as we were getting ready to have our first close for our fund and start doing our first deals, that was kind of like the height of the market, and like things had just started to fall downwards, which was the beginning of 2022. And even then, we co-invested in a company called Better, which is now crushing it, but that was one that raised an absurd amount of money off of a memo, pre-product, pre-revenue, and they ended up raising $30 million, shooting to raise $20 million in about like a month or two, raised $30 million, completely oversubscribed, and then raised another $20 million before even launching their product. So they raised $50 million off a memo without launching a product, which was crazy, and this is not happening today. It's a different market, it's a different world. Like I said earlier, I think we're not at the bottom. I think things are still coming back more. But yeah, it's tough to raise capital. It's obviously I didn't live through the .com bust. I've heard that was an even harder time than now. But let's wait and see, because it could get as bad, if not worse. So, yeah.
Thank you, Pablo. And I had a quick question for all of you. How do you bridge the gap between valuations from the startup perspective and also from the investor's perspective? And could you walk us through more of those negotiations and how those go?
I'm gonna let Mark go here first.
Okay, so as an entrepreneur and just as a fact, and I know Walt will agree with me here, right? The value of your business is what the market will bear for it, no matter what. It's always been that way, and it'll always be that way. Okay, so again, now in the all of you here in this room and those listening can have billion-dollar businesses, right? And I use that term a little loose because back when I was younger, in your shoes, to have a billion-dollar business was like, yeah, right, never, right? It was like, can I have a $10 million business to be a $1 million business, right? So I think a lot of these exits and success stories have changed the game there, but it's critical, the fundamentals, like Walt says, there's certain multiples that have kind of been around for a long time. They'll be around, for the next 15, 20, 30 years. And that's based on, your true revenue, your profit, your EBITDA, right? There's more multiples depending on the segment that you're in. However, right, once you start working with businesses like strategic investors or acquirers, right? Because whoever is going to buy your business one day as an exit, you're either going to IPO or you're going to exit to a private equity group, or you're going to exit to a strategic. So private equity, they buy on multiples of revenue and EBITDA, period. IPO, it's based on the market, but again, there's certain kind of rules and kind of conditions of how that goes. Sometimes there's exceptions to the rule in terms of the size, but it goes, on both ends of the spectrum. Strategics goes a very different way, right? It's how important you are to the business, how is your revenue profile to be absorbed by that business, and what their future roadmaps look like. So as an example, like the quote-unquote valuation that we raised at prior to actually taking money for the funders, we kind of did a quasi down round, synthetic down round, if you will, right? But it was more of a realistic valuation, and we wholeheartedly welcomed it because, again, one thing that's important as a founder is you want to make sure that you do get to that exit, because the number one most important thing is shareholder return, always. So you want to either be able to exit your business to a strategic, a private equity group, somebody, or IPO, which is much less common. So focusing on those metrics, focusing on realistic valuations, right? It may be tempting to be like, I want to be on LinkedIn promoting my business. I raised $20 to $30 million at a $200 million valuation or whatever. Great. But guess what? You go in and look at the results past that headline. How many of those businesses, one, are still around, two, are still thriving, three, exited, and what value those companies exited? A massive percentage of them will be at lower rounds, lower valuations than those headlines were at. And that, at the end of the day, the headlines don't matter, right? It's what's in your pocket at the end of the day when you exit this business for you and your shareholders.
Yeah, negotiation is the art of letting the other person get what you want. And if you think about that, it's a great way to strategize if you are negotiating with another founder or with a VC. And what I think you take from that is you can either approach it as kind of like a binary outcome, or you can get creative with how you approach something to where you can create a win-win where the market is happy and I as the investor am happy and we've aligned ourselves. And if you do that, you're more likely to get a deal done. If you could balance the risk. If it's one-sided, you're always going to have somebody pissed off or disappointed and it's not going to work. On the way up here, I had 2 calls, and one was a company we invested in last year. We weren't quite there on the valuation. They wanted $15 million. We thought that was rich for where they were, but there was a lot of promise. But what I did was I structured that with an option, where I had 12 more months to put in another $1 million on the same terms. So if they exploded, I get to buy in, and that buys down my valuation. If they're not doing well, I've only put in $1 million, and I'm not nearly as at risk. And that conversation now, so we just extended it actually, so we've got another couple months to decide. And he said, well, I think I want to take a break down right now. I'm going to take 500, but I'm afraid of the dilution. And what I told him is, I said, well, how much do you think you can raise? I think I could take $1 million, but I don't really want to because I don't want the dilution. And I said, well, where are you going to raise the Series A at? And he said, probably in July. And I'm going to be at probably $1 million in revenue by July. I said, well, if you take the extra $1 million, that buys you at least another 6, probably another 12 months. So where are you going to be in December? So I'll probably be at $5 million. I said, okay. So in $1 million, you might be lucky to raise a $25 million valuation. But in 6 months later, you're going to be able to raise probably $10 million at a $60 to $100 million valuation. And so don't worry about the damn 3% you're giving up by taking another $500,000 right now. Think about the 20% that you're going to save on the back end in 6 months from now, and you're going to give yourself all sorts of leverage. So I think a lot of times founders are very short-sighted and thinking in today's terms and not plotting out where you're going to be in 6, 12, 24 months from now, and too protective of your dilution now, when your real job, and especially in an environment like this, is to get from here to there and do as well as you can. If you have to give up a little bit of equity, who cares? If your company survives and you continue to grow, you're going to more than make up for it.
Just to add super quick to that, at the end of the day, like you said, it's a negotiation and it's all about leverage, and who has the most leverage is going to win the negotiation, or at least get the favored side, or the favored outcome. So whatever you can do to build more leverage for yourself, right? This could be by bootstrapping, getting traction early on, and really self-founders. It's like the more traction that you can get, the easier the fundraise is going to be, the quicker it's going to be, and the quicker you can get back to building your company. Because in the current market we're in, you could easily spend 6 to 12 months raising around the funding. And you don't really want to do that. That's not the goal of your business. You want to be operating your company and growing your company. So the more leverage you can get, the better.
So we're in the business of buying and selling existing companies. Most of them are already profitable. Some of them are close to profitable or not as profitable as they will be. And so our perspective is this. Valuation, to me, is just a number on a spreadsheet. Don't confuse valuation with the value of a company. They're very different. If you look at 2 companies that each are on the market for $50 million sale, there may be one that is head and shoulders more attractive to you than the other. That one's more valuable to you for whatever reasons you've decided. So the question is, what's the value of a company, not the valuation? And egos are very expensive. They cost you a lot of time, a lot of money, and typically both. Valuation is an ego number. Getting to the core value of a company, which is not just a multiple of some number out there, whether it's revenue or EBITDA or whatever, It's really about the people running the company, what their focus is, and as a CEO, if you've ever read the book The Outsiders, there's only 5 places that a CEO is supposed to apply capital to increase the return to shareholders. You can either buy back stock, you can distribute as a dividend, you can invest it internally in R&D, you acquire other companies, okay, or you can lower debt. And at any given time, there's probably 2 of those 5 that at the time you're trying to make the decision are going to help you decide where to put your focus and where to put your money. What we as investors are going to value is the quality of your decision making as an operating team. Are you putting it in the right places at that moment? And when 6 months from now your business has evolved, are you putting it in the right places then, which may be different places now? So value of a company can be measured a whole bunch of different ways, and we can talk about that. But a lot of it has to do with the people operating the company, as well as what space are they in, have they thought it out, have they used their money. We can go on a whole diatribe about that. But my main message to you would be, if you're hung up on valuation, then you're hung up on ego, and it's going to cost you a lot of money.
Yeah, so we speak about this spread of perceptions of valuation. Pablo, you mentioned, Walt, you mentioned that there's a lot of ego in valuation. So, Mark, I know that you talked about always being realistic about your valuations and getting through a bunch of downturns and market cycles. How can you describe your decision making as more like a practical entrepreneur?
I mean, honestly, the most important thing that I would advise, I did this when I was in college, actually, when I just finished. I had different ideas, businesses in mind, a lot more of an entrepreneurial environment. I was actually a TA here at UF in the entrepreneurial program for a course, and it was one of the most richest experiences I had. So I was always really just, throwing business ideas out there, doing businesses here, different local things. I would have loved for a fund like these guys to be around, because I'm sure we were fast friends and done business together. So it's great to see. I would advise you, when you're coming up with these ideas, when you're dreaming, when you're daring, when you're trying to change the status quo of the world, right? Write it down on a piece of paper, a notebook that you're not going to throw out, that you'll okay? Including what your plan is, from the starting point to where you want to exit, right? So I'm telling you, right, Ryan kind of mentioned that the expectations of the hold periods, and I'm sure Walt are very, similar probably too, is that the investors will give you time to exit, right? But again, the plan of the investment is shareholder return one way or the other, right? This is not a charity business, right? There are nonprofits, that's a different line of work. So plan what your outcome is. What does the end credits of the movie look like, right? Visualize that. How are you going to get there? Work backwards. Because if you do that, right, if you do that, you really, listen, it's not easy. People say things, people throw things at you, this and that, trust me. But if you visualize the plan from start to finish, the end, the bookends of it, right, then the valuation doesn't matter, because the value matters, the exit matters, the end part of it matters. You guys want to change, you want to influence, you want to do that, right? You want to be rewarded for it. That's the whole purpose of entrepreneurship, right? So whether you get $1 million, $100 grand, $10 million, $100 million, it doesn't matter. So if you sitting there as an entrepreneur with any investor, to be honest, and saying, my company's worth $25 million, you're full of it, because it's not up to you. They're the ones cutting the check. And to be honest, they're taking a gamble, like anyone in the casino, because what matters is whoever down the road may or may not buy your company and give you that value, right? So it's about discipline. And I've watched a lot of entrepreneurs that raised money where I was envious of the headlines and this and that, and I'm still around, okay? But it comes back to discipline. And, I going back to my notebook, I do have it, where I wrote different sectors and things that I wanted to get into. And I've been told I was crazy or this or that by investors, but I can go back to that and say, I'm doing A, B, C, D that I dreamed about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, whatever, okay? And so that means the opportunity is still there for me to continue to be disciplined to get to that value. Forget the valuations, it doesn't matter. As Ryan said, If somebody comes to me tomorrow and says, Mark, I want to give you $20 million for 25% of your business, what does it matter? They want to give you $20 million. Can that help you or not to get to your end goal? So really think about that.
So the relationship between private capital and startups is extremely mutually symbiotic. And could you tell us more about, like, and from a strategic lens, how both sides help each other?
Or the accelerator.
So, like they said, it's definitely a symbiotic relationship, but in a lot of cases, it can be not that. It can be actually like a really hurtful relationship if the vision is not aligned for both parties. The way we think about it, we're investing in companies so early on that we're taking a bet on a team, right? At the end of the day, everything in a company will change over the course of that company's lifetime, except the team. When you're starting off, right? Because the product will pivot, sometimes even the market. You might even have a crazy pivot. We've seen it happen, and you never know where it's going to end up. So when we're investing in a company, we're in it for the long haul, and we're giving the founders full authority and autonomy to take it where they want. And our goal, the way we see our goal, is helping shorten the friction that they have to deal with when it comes to closing deals, when it comes to raising capital. If we can help them close a round in 2 weeks versus 2 months, we're saving them a lot of valuable time that they can spend on building product, talking to users, and scaling their startup. So this is the way we're thinking about building our firm, and this is why we host so many events and programs. It's all about creating a platform for our companies. So we just hosted the Games Innovation Summit. I know a lot of you guys were there. And at the end of the day, these events are great. It's a great educational opportunity. It's a great networking opportunity. But we're also being really strategic about bringing in our portfolio companies and putting them on a platform, and giving them the opportunity to present and potentially close deals and raise capital. So I think that's the ultimate role of the VC. The last thing that I'll say is there's a guy named Ron Conway, and they call him the Godfather of Silicon Valley. He's like a super angel. He's invested in over 1,000 startups at this point. And everybody's dream is to have this guy on the cap table. And what he says is that an investor's job is to add value in these inflection periods of a startup's life. At the end of the day, the founders are going to run the company how they want to run the company, but there are certain periods of time where that company is either undergoing a pivot or dealing with a lot of hurdles, and those are the times where the investor can really move the needle for the company. It's not on a day-to-day calling them and telling them what to do. It's in these short periods that come up, and those are the times that matter most. So.
Yeah, a dollar's a dollar. So if you're a founder, and you're weighing two different people, like, it doesn't matter in terms of like what one person's doing in terms of dollars. It's the same, but maybe the valuation's different. But if you're a founder, I guess my advice is interview them and see what value are they bringing to the table, and also what expectations should you have for them to do. I mean, some founders come to us and expect us to just close sales for them, and that's not what we do. I mean, we're expecting them to go out and close sales. We'll make the intros that we have, but we don't have a Rolodex of every company out there, every enterprise, and we're not going to go out and open the door for every one of them. We will when we can, obviously. But each firm's a little bit different. We've got a bunch of former operators there, and we've got experts at raising capital and a Rolodex of other funds. So, when a founder like Mark comes to us, the best thing a founder can do is build a rapport with your investor and their network of investors, and keep in constant communication with them, and go to them with help, with advice. I think founders make a big mistake when they assume they can't tell their investors something because they're worried how they're going to perceive that. I think very rarely do investors penalize somebody. I mean, it's reality, and they want to know about it. And I have one founder. We've had, I think, 75 investments I've done since I've been at Florida Funders, and one went under so far. And that one, I saw him recently at a conference. He said, well, I was having a lot of mental troubles because a bunch of shit had happened in his life. And I was afraid to come talk to you because I thought you would look down upon me and you know, and how you would look as an investor. So I just tried to deal with it. He's like, I realized in retrospect I needed help. So you should have come to me, because we would have had time to maybe help figure it out. You can't come to me afterwards and help. I can't figure it out once, you know, the coffin's closed. If you're a founder, go to work with your investors, ask them for help, ask them whether they can network, ask them what advice, and constantly be in communication, because it will give you, more doors open and more advice to guide you, because inevitably you will run into things that you've never experienced before, or challenges, and even just getting a second piece of advice or other thoughts will help drive clarity in your mind as to the correct decision to make. We're not there to make the decision for you. At the private equity stage, we might be making the decision for you, but at our stage, we're going to guide you, and that's going to hopefully help you make better decisions to get to that private equity stage or exit.
So, one of the key things you can do is let's start with the premise that the Innovation Academy teaches here. Fall in love with the problem, not the solution. As a CEO, the reason why you need money is you're trying to solve a problem. You need to make sure that that problem you're trying to solve aligns with the goals, motivations, and objectives of the investors sitting up here or wherever. That's not just the outcome, but also the timing, and then also the style. Are they hands-on? Are they hands-off? You know, types of investors and so forth. Secondly is get a board of advisors. Get a board of advisors and go for, don't be shy. Go for the biggest, burliest, most accomplished advisor that you thought probably wouldn't even take your phone call, and go for it, because you'd be surprised. They're likely to want to say yes to someone young and starting out. And then the second thing I would say is, if you get the right advisor, let them advise you and take their advice. Okay? No sense going out and doing that and then just shutting them down and, you know, running off, you know, in a different direction. So go get the biggest, baddest advisor you can get out there. And by the way, get them before you're looking to take money. And then have them help you to screen and understand whether or not the money, the quality of the money coming to you is a good fit for your dream and your startup. And whether you're a good fit for the investors, because your advisors sometimes will say, be patient, they're not the right ones for you. Okay? And when we're just sitting there going, man, I see $1 hanging out there, I want it bad. Okay? Well, if you want it bad, you get it bad.
Can I add something real quick? You brought up an awesome point. I just saw a company put this the other day, young founder, and he got to his advisor's side, and it was 3 billionaires that every one of you would know their names in this room. And I was like, how the heck did you guys, you gotta tell me, like, how did you get this advisory board? He's like, I reached out to him and just said, I need help. You've got experience in my space. I'd love for you to get on board. And I'm like, I couldn't believe it. Like, you might as well reach out to Bill Gates and Elon Musk and ask them for advice. And this person got these 2 people. So to this point, if you're starting something, find somebody with relevant experience and don't be afraid to reach out to them, because you never know.
Ryan, let me pull the thread. I want you to answer this.
Yep.
As an investor, how did you think about that founder and that company with that revelation that you found who the advisors were? And tell me what your thought was about them as an investor and someone who might want to put money in.
It was incredible credibility that they just added. I mean, we look at all sorts of factors, but regardless of whatever I was initially thinking, it made me say, okay, we've got to dial in on this one and learn more about this company. May or may not be a fit, but damn, that's impressive. So, like, it definitely, we're going into deeper diligence to learn more, because if that founder can do that, then they're aggressive enough to go get customers, and they're going to scale that business. Like, it just gives us so much more confidence of somebody being able to do that and willing to do that, not being afraid.
So if you put $1 million in, do you have any doubts that they had the knowledge to know how to apply that $1 million?
I think we always got to have a little bit of doubt there, but I think I have a lot more confidence, and that's what we're looking for. I saw one of your questions was about risk, and I think we're all coming from a very different risk perspective. But at the end of the day, all of us do is about risk, and it's a calculated risk, and the more I can calculate that risk and measure the opportunity versus that, the more clear the opportunity becomes and whether or not to invest. And when that spread widens enough, and the opportunity outweighs the known risks, and the value of the unknown risk, it's a deal that we're going to move forward on.
So I'm going to give you a founder perspective on this. They brought up phenomenal points. So one of the first things that I did in my business, I actually had an MVP, minimum viable product. I came from an existing kind of operational business that was making a lot of money, and I decided to say, hey, let me stop making money and go do a tech startup. But organically, okay, what happened was I met someone who then introduced me to a very high-ranking person, and at the time I was very hardcore into travel and hospitality tech. And I met, for confidentiality purposes, I don't say anything, but I met the CTO of this organization and presented to a room of 30 people my MVP, my vision on what was going to happen. He pulled me to the side after, he said, can we have dinner, you know, and at the dinner, he literally said, let me be your advisor, okay? And this was many years ago. However, what's interesting is that right now, I just called Ryan, we spoke about it a couple weeks ago, that the organization that that person was working at is very interested. They're a huge strategic partner of ours right now. They're looking to throw a ton of capital at us. They want to buy our business, right? So kind of bringing these points home, it's so importantly crucial, and that's what I meant earlier of being strategic, right? And I'm going to say something that, again, it may not seem so obvious to you, okay? So let's say you're going into medtech. Of course you want someone from that industry, right? But at the same time, you want someone, really do, somebody on your advisory board as an investor, it doesn't matter, as a resource, that knows how to operate businesses and make money, that knows about profit margins and gross margins and EBITDA, hiring up and down through downturns. You know, the more dirty, the worse the stories, frankly, the better, because that keeps you sound. As once you take even a dollar from an investor, you're on a lease on life, okay? And you're constantly thinking through how to get to that shareholder return no matter at what cost, whether that's showing the traction to get to the values and so forth, okay? Always, all these the points that these guys are saying, I'm thinking about all of the time. And if you surround yourself with good people, connect the dots, going back to like what you want that script to look like, it'll organically play out. Like I can tell you that our advisory board are rock stars, but our investors are rock stars also, some strategic, some financial, but they all, you know, it's all part of the story and the journey, right? Like for me, you know, we were transitioning, I was up in New York, but I'm from Miami and Aventura, and it would have been literally my number one choice if you kind of said write it on, would have been Four Wonders, and it organically happened, right? And there's a lot of benefits from it. I also advise startups, and it's interesting, I was at a tour for one of my kids last week, and one of the guys that was part of the tour, he was a junior, and as part of it, you know, he was saying how good the school was. He started 2 businesses. I said, come again? He's like, yeah, I have 2 businesses on Shopify and Amazon, and this. I said, and I said, forget the tour, I don't really care. I was like, what's your email? Let's talk. Tell me about your businesses. Where are you going to school? Right? So, because again, I'm not an investor. I'm at a different level. Maybe one day I will be an investor. However, I also, as Walt was saying, take on the opportunities. I'm seeking out those opportunities to teach and learn and help. And one of my startups that I was advising in less than 2 years just exited to Bumble a couple months ago. You know, so it really is that simple. Don't read too much into it. Think of the script. Think of who could help you. Dare to kind of pull down those walls. Forget just LinkedIn. Just go through your Rolodex. Connect with people. I told this to someone the other day. Just because you may not be a fit for the mandate of what like a Florida Funders or a OneSixOne could be, who cares? Pick up the phone, go to an event of theirs, mingle with them, meet someone on the team, just for the hell of it, because maybe they don't give you money, but they could give you connections too, right? They're seeing crazy deal flow. And that may be more important than the money at that point in time that could change your trajectory to get to where you want to go.
Just one punctuation point on that, as Mark said. Go to where they are in person. I will give you a tip. If you're in your living room, success is not going to jump out of your closet and attack you. Okay? You got to go and you got to put yourself in those environments to talk to and to meet the people.
So, speaking to the relationships you guys all have with your investors or with your portfolio companies, you maybe elaborate as a panel on the difference that a VC might have with a portfolio company versus a private equity company.
VC start.
Yeah, I can't speak for the private equity side, but I'll speak for our firm. So essentially what we've tried to do is build as symbiotic of a relationship as possible and to try to move the needle as much as possible for our portfolio founders. So what we realized about a year and a half ago, we started investing. A couple months in, we had our first few portfolio companies, and we realized that we were a lot more actively involved with the portfolio founders that were actually keeping us updated, that were telling us, every week, every month, this is where we're at, this is what we're doing, this is what we're struggling with. And so at that point in time, we decided to make it a regular thing for all of our portfolio. So now we actually do monthly calls with all of our portfolio companies. This is not a very common practice, not a lot of people do this. And also, we don't force our founders into this, so like some of them opt out of it. So right now, about 60% of our portfolio opts into this. And so we have a monthly call, reoccurring on the calendar. Every single month, we'll jump on a Zoom call, usually anywhere between 30 and 60 minutes, and they'll give us the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? They'll tell us what they're struggling with, what they need help with right now, and where the progress is at. And for us, this is the best way for us to be able to help them, because now we know exactly what we can do to help, right? We were having I'll give you an example, we were having one of these monthly calls in March of this year, and one of our portfolio founders said, hey, we're actually running out of runway. We've got a month and a half left of runway, and product is going great, we have some great traction with users, but we're running out of cash. So immediately we get off this call, start doing what we can, reaching out to our network. We're literally doing like cold outreach for our portfolio founders. That's how involved we are. And so we started reaching out on LinkedIn to people that went to the same university as this founder. And sure enough, I get in touch with a CEO of a company that has about 1,000 employees based in Jacksonville. And I'm like, oh, this will be a great potential investor for him. So I messaged this guy, I've never met him before, and I'm like, hey, would you be open to hopping on a call with one of our portfolio founders to see if you could mentor him? He would really appreciate your advice. He's also a Vanderbilt alum, just like you. And the guy responded and said, yeah, here's my email, connect me. And so we made the intro. 2 weeks, the guy jumps on one call, agrees on the first call to invest $200,000 into this guy's company, and 2 weeks later wires the money. All of a sudden, they got months of runway, and they're back in the game, and now they're crushing it. It's one of the top performing companies in our portfolio. But had we not been in the loop and talking to our portfolio founders regularly, we would have never known that. We would have never been able to even help them.
Yeah, I don't think you ever set out to become friends with your portfolio company with any founders, but there's definitely, probably half that I would say I would consider good friends and consider a partner friend. Hopefully it feels the same here, but you go through ebbs and flows through the process. The negotiation part when you're looking to close is always rough, and you get through and you close it and things get a little bit better, but I think at the end of the day, an investor has a job to do and they've got LPs to answer to, and I think a founder, they recognize that most of the time, and the closer they are to staying tight with that founder or staying tight with that investor, the better. The more reporting, the more information, the more everything. The best thing I can say is if you're a founder, spend time with the investor, and it doesn't have to be going to all sorts of fun things with them, but going out, grab a drink when they're in your town, or when you're in their town, call them up, stop by the office, say hi to them. What it does is it puts you at top of the mind, and it allows, like me for example, to stay close to Mark and Simplenight, and he's at the top of my mind when I'm talking to him on a regular basis. When I'm not talking to him on a regular basis, kind of falls into that heap, and we've got 90-something portfolio companies, so every day I'm talking to other investors, other venture capital firms, other private equity firms that are wondering about our companies. I can promise you this, the ones that I'm staying close to are the ones at the top of my mind that I'm going to talk about, and the ones I haven't talked to in a while, you know, I just can't, I don't feel comfortable talking to them because I don't know the latest stats. I don't know that they're about to run out of cash, and so I'm not necessarily bringing them up. I guess I would just leave you with, if you're a founder, give a lot of information to your investors, stay close, stay tight, get drinks with them, go to events, do something with them, and let them get to know you on a personal level. I mean, I don't think that ever hurts.
Good question for the two of you, just to clarify. When you say you're talking to them, do you mean like you're talking to them, or you're texting them, or you're sending them an email?
I'll do whatever. I mean, I have founders that text me, and you know, we can text on Saturday night at midnight if they've got a problem, or they're you know, text them, hey, what's up? Like, what did you do today? Necessarily, but you know, there are founders that we are tight like that with in the portfolio. I have a different role, so some people in our organization are a lot tighter like that, and then you know, but I have a open phone line in the calendar that I try to tell any founder, you need to talk, just book time on my calendar and I will happily talk with you. Whatever it is, it's good news, bad news, or you're just trying to get a second opinion on something, that's what we're here for. That's what we want to be involved with. So please call me during those times, because it may make a difference. And especially, I think founders make a big mistake when they start to get term sheets to either from a new fund for a new investment or acquisition. Most of them, Mark not included, don't have a lot of investment banking experience, and they don't understand how a transaction is going to work. And that little term that you're not paying attention to could be the difference between you taking on a huge check and you taking on a little check, or your investors. And there are so many little nuances to that, that if you give an investor who knows what they're doing in the transaction time to help you out before you kind of pot committed to going down a certain path, you will open the possibilities to making that transaction infinitely better.
And for us, definitely in person or phone calls, you know, obviously we have the monthly regular call, but also if we're ever in the same city, you know, we'll always reach out, try to meet up in person. I was in Seattle like 2 weeks ago, and we have 3 portfolio companies in Seattle, and I saw all the founders. I was only there for 3 days. And I was there for an event, which was an entire day of my time there, but I was still able to see all of them. So really we want to be as close as possible to them, because we want them to be comfortable. Like, if it's a Saturday at midnight and they have an emergency, they can text us or they can call us. And if we don't have that rapport with them, if we don't have that relationship, they're not going to feel comfortable enough to call us when they really need help.
Go ahead.
So again, to stress what Ryan said, so there's been times where I've gotten term sheets or offers or proposals or things from existing investors, but also foreign equity, debt, whatever, right? And I will call Ryan and we'll talk about this or other things that have come up, and I say, what do you think? Ask for help, ask for opinions, ask for advice. It's really critical. Investors shouldn't just put on the capital front, they should serve as a significant resource to you throughout the life of the investment and beyond, because, you know, Ryan will call me for just different things from like an industry perspective of, hey, what do you think about this startup, what do you think about this, you know, and so forth, and is there any, you know, how can we collaborate on things? We do it all the time, and I would really kind of, when you do take on, when you're looking at your investors, like, think about what are broader implications of that relationship. And again, don't be afraid to ask for help. You gotta speak up. You gotta let them know what's going on. Don't hold back, because if they don't know they're running out of cash, they can't help.
So respect your advisor's time. Be constructive with them. But that said, how you communicate, think about how important the topic is, and think about the topic before you choose how to communicate. You don't want to say, hey, what do you think about this term sheet, through a text. That's just going to be painful for an advisor to be sitting there thumbing back at you, you know. same thing in an email. Do you want an interactive discussion, or you want to just pass information in a structured way that they can then respond to in a structured way? Or if it's really a strategy, or if it's more detailed about a timesheet or about a term sheet, send the details and schedule a time to talk about it. Because you're going to want to go back and forth, and it's really painful to go back and forth via email and lose the thread. And plus, you may not have their undivided attention. So think about the importance of what you want to discuss, and think about how you're communicating that. Respect your advisor's time. And please don't rule out the person-to-person aspect of it, because relationships will come out of that. But also, the way you ask a question, I guarantee you each of these three gentlemen are going to hear an inflection in your voice and are probably going to answer it differently based on the way you're asking the question. Or they may say, all right, I'm hearing a little concern there. Tell me what's on your mind, which wouldn't come across in an email. So think about that.
I think to finally put a bow on such an amazing discussion, I think everyone would love to know more about how they can actually become involved in these sorts of industries, whether it be venture capital, entrepreneurship, or private equity. What are the biggest pieces of advice for them starting out in college?
Go ahead, Mark.
So, on my end, kind of being an entrepreneur that came from UF, actually, go Gators. So, challenge, right, is a problem, as Walt said. Think about how you could do things differently. Not everything, right? We're not all Renaissance, but when something's smacking you in the face, where it doesn't leave you, where you become obsessive, where it's so plain in sight and obvious to you, where you know you can make an influence because you have so much experience with it, plus you know a lot of people that together with you can probably take on this opportunity, follow it, for sure, okay? But be reasonable also, right? Not every good idea means that it's going to be a great outcome. So there's business plans that I've drawn up. I've spent a lot of time on them, and some of them sit on the shelf, some of them, they never see the light of day. One thing that I tell people, even a lot of my team members, is I don't think there's a bad idea. It's not necessarily right now, and maybe it could be tweaked or something like that, or maybe it's a good idea for somebody else or some other kind of business. But if you don't throw the ideas out there, you will never it will never materialize. Network, okay? I'm like a super networker, nonstop. I've always been, and it will always go well for you, always. Because you could be someone that has been, spending 4 years at UF, accounting track, business track, whatever, and maybe your senior year or you're in grad school or 5 years after you're working in an accounting job and you get a meeting and something happens and then you see a business opportunity in pet care, okay? And you decide to make a little angel investment in that, and that makes you a multi-millionaire. You get your accounting job, you make good money, but you're not going to thread the needle, right? So always be open-minded, always. Always listen, take every meeting. Do you know how many meetings that I've taken with investors? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. You know how many meetings I've taken with entrepreneurs? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. To the point where sometimes I'm like, should I do this call? But you know what? I always, the other side of like my shoulder says, take the call because you never know, okay? Like, you just never know if you don't try. So always kind of use your better judgment, but definitely put the effort in and try.
I want to double click on the networking piece. That's like the most important thing. As a student here, that's something that I did a lot of, and the reality is that there's never been a better time to network because you're all like in similar shoes, in a similar stage in life. It's a lot easier to strike up a conversation or have commonalities, right? So meet as many people as you can because you never know where your fellow colleagues are going to be in 5 or 10 years. So that's super critical. The next thing, attend a lot of events. Like go, not just in Gainesville, right? Like go to Tampa for Synapse. Go to Miami for Emerge Americas. Go to these big conferences and events and introduce yourself to other venture firms, private equity firms, and just say, hey, I'm just interested in this industry. I want to work in this field. Do you have any advice for me? Do you think there's anybody I should talk to? Start building these relationships and just connecting with people. The last thing I'll say is leverage social media. This is like incredibly valuable. Like we would not even have a venture fund today if it wasn't for LinkedIn. Like we have used LinkedIn to an absolute like extreme. And like the whole concept of like building in public. If you want to build a startup, like constantly post about what you're doing, what challenges you're facing, what progress you're making, and you know, even backtracking a little bit about your journey, right? Your journey to, it doesn't have to be about a startup you're starting, but about your journey about graduating and trying to break into private equity, trying to break into venture capital, trying to get a job with a startup. Like, just post about these things. Like, you're all at an event today, right? You can all take a picture with somebody who's here at the event, or take a picture of the speakers and like post it and be like, hey, I had a great time connecting with so-and-so and like meeting so-and-so at this event. Like, this is literally what we've done, and like we've been able to connect with such great people just doing this. Realize that everybody in the private equity, or I can't speak for private equity, but at least like venture capital world is on LinkedIn and is on Twitter. And these are the platforms that you need to be on if you want to get in front of these people. This is a relationship game, so you have to be able to develop these relationships and get to know these people and get on their radars because they're incredibly busy people. So this is one really valuable tool set that like all of you can go home and do today. So highly recommend that.
I love coming up for anything to do up here with the Venture Club. And part of the reason why is the worst advice I ever got was here at UF. I'm a two-time Gator, and you know, I was getting close to my senior year, and I went to talk to the dean about, you know, what options are out there. I didn't really know what to do, and I really didn't have any idea what all was out there. And he asked me, you know, what degree are you graduating? I said finance. And he said, well, you know, your real opportunities in wealth management. So about other stuff. No, your real opportunity is only going to be in wealth management. And it was the worst piece of advice I've ever heard, because that's where I went. And I spent 7 years of my life stuck in that position trying to figure things out. And I didn't know about venture capital. If I did, I would have moved to San Francisco the day I graduated and started working out there, or investment banking and private equity. I had no idea what private equity was, or would have gone to New York and done that in a second. So you guys are at the golden age where UF is unbelievably recognized and appreciated finally. And you've got programs like this and opportunities like this to get involved. So my advice would be, everything I've said in networking, but get involved too. You're here. If you're not in this venture club, like you should be, if you haven't joined, then I'm going to throw this out there because I love what is happening here, and I always want to try to give back to the opportunity I did not have. So my email is Ryan, RYAN, at FloridaFounders.com. My goal is to hire our next intern for next summer out of this program. So if you're a member of the Florida Venture, the Warrington Ventures Club, you email me. I'm going to try to pick an intern out of this starting next summer if you're willing to come to Tampa. I don't really want to do remote, but if you're willing to be in Tampa for the summer or whatever, I will try to hire an intern out of this group right here. So if you're here, you heard this tonight, shoot me an email.
I'll wrap up briefly. Entrepreneurship is hard. It's one of the hardest ways to make money. Worth it. But if you're going to go down this path, be very, very clear that none of this matters if you haven't figured out why you're doing it. The highest correlation to success is you understanding your why. If you understand your why and crystallize that very clearly, you'll figure out how. Okay? But if you get too ensconced in the how, all of a sudden you're 7 years into a career doing things that you realize that's not really where your heart lies and what you want to be doing. Okay? That's not an indictment at all. He probably was very clear on what his why is, what he wants to do. I think Ryan is. Okay? We didn't have the resources available back then to figure out these other things, as Ryan articulated. So be very clear on your why, because in your darkest, deepest moments as an entrepreneur, it's your why that's going to help you persist and push through that when everything else is telling you not to. Okay? That's the best key to success that I can say. That's not the only key, but that is probably one of the strongest drivers that I can say out there as an entrepreneur.
Listen, I graduated from here 18 years ago, I think, almost. And I've been up here. I'm much more seasoned than I was But make no mistake, the most important, like for me, being in your shoes, the drive, for sure the why, but the drive, okay? Listen, I went to grad school, University of Miami after this, great school. I wanted to be at an investment bank in New York. That's where I wanted to go after. I went to the Career Center at UM. It's a very well-connected school if you want to be in accounting, down in South Florida for jobs, whatever, Florida, whatever. As far as the investment banks, the kind of key ones, was useless to me at the time. Sorry, UM. And what did I do? We were off on Wednesdays during my week. Every single Wednesday at 5 a.m., I was on the Spirit flight to New York. I would go, set up interviews, keep adding them. Every single week, I'd go to New York. I'd come back that night. I kept doing it. It was like a vicious cycle, okay? Then I graduated. I had some, next steps, second round, third rounds with some investment banks. And I didn't have my job at grad school like the people that were in the big accounting firms or whatever, the jobs in Miami. But to me, that's not what I wanted. That's not what the drive was about for me. I was going to get the job at the investment bank. I also had some offers in Miami, so I definitely hedged. Don't bet the farm on one thing or the other, okay? Be smart. But I followed that drive. I crashed on a friend's couch in New York, and I eventually got the job at JP Morgan, one of the best investment banks in the world, right? And then all of a sudden, the Career Center at UM was, Mark, can you help our students now get networked in New York? And I said, absolutely, okay? My other best friend, he wasn't going on the 5 a.m. flights every week like me, but he was from New York. He was always going to move back to New York. I was from Miami. He got a job at Blackstone. He's still there in New York working at Blackstone now for 18 years, okay? And so that drive is, don't let anyone take it away from you, okay? The amount of times that seasoned investors, my parents, my friends, my wife, it doesn't matter, okay? Do not let that inside voice in your head ever be shot down by somebody, because it doesn't matter. Listen to all of the principles, the advice, network like crazy, but don't ever lose the drive, because that's what's going to change the world. That's what's going to make you happy, and follow that passion, okay?
I'd say the last thing just on that, 99% of the people are out there are going to say it won't work. And then they'll say, well, it might work, but you can't do it. And then at the end, once you've done it, which is the ultimate victory, they're going to say, well, you got lucky. Yeah, persist, okay?
Thank you all.
One thing.
One more thing.
I know, it should end, but it wraps it up here. These guys are hustlers, and many of you know them, what they've done to build something here. And again, I told you I love giving back to Gainesville and UF, and they called me several years ago. Hey, can you come up and be on a panel? I said, sure. I didn't honestly really know who they were, but I was excited for what they were doing. I'd take 7 hours out of my day to drive up here, drive back to Tampa. And I got up here, and I loved it. I loved their energy. And then you became a scout for us, and you called me and said, I want you to take a look at this company. And it's now our largest investment that we have at Florida Funders. We would have never made the connection or met them. And it actually turned into two companies, because the founder was with the prior one. Many of you probably seen Joey Levy from Better come up here and speak. It was because of that introduction. It was because you networked and reached out to me and asked me to come up here. Because I want to get back to Gainesville, and that led to so many things that happened after that, and multi-millions of dollars invested. And, you just never know where these things are going to go. So take all this advice, hopefully, and you guys will get a hell of a school. It's going to pay off for you if you network and take all this advice. Don't let your drive kill it.